Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. It's really a great pleasure to be part of this really important discussion. I'm going to focus my remarks on equity and racial equity in advocacy and campaigning, because that has been the focus of my work. And I want to put forward 3 suggestions for how we can start to have a stronger focus on racial equity in this type of work. But I will preface my comments with the acknowledgement that this is difficult. And for those of us who have the job of persuading often reluctant politicians to spend more and better aid, particularly at this moment, the political climate has never been more difficult. But I'm convinced that getting these things right will actually make that job a little easier. The most powerful and impactful movements of my generation have, from Me Too to Black Lives Matter, have been led by Black women. And we all know that passion, drive, creativity, and ideas are not limited to any one ethnic group. So given this, I ask myself why there are so few Black women, Black people, people of color leading development campaigns, especially here in Europe. And so my first suggestion is that there is a targeted effort to ensure more Black people and more minority voices are represented in the leadership of our advocacy and campaigning efforts. And very practically, this means organizations should be deliberate about recruiting more Black people into advocacy director, campaigns director, policy director roles. And I promise I'm not lobbying for myself here. But these mono-ethnic leadership teams and coalitions just cannot continue, in my view. And I find that the standard response from organizations is that the pipeline just isn't there, which inevitably leads to delay at best and inaction at worst. But I was really struck that on the day that Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the merger of DFID and the Foreign Office, there were 2 parallel conversations taking place. There was one conversation convened by the leaders of the UK development sector, which was largely overwhelmingly white, and a parallel conversation that was convened by the women who set up the Diasporic Development Forum, where people of colour came together and reflected on what the merger might mean for development and for our work. And I think our response would be immediately strengthened if these 2 groups came together, if they planned together, if they campaigned together. And I would definitely encourage the leadership of the UK's development space to reach out in that respect. Secondly, I think we have to integrate a much stronger analysis of race in our campaigns, particularly those campaigns that focus on the underlying causes of poverty. So it's not enough to say that poverty is sexist or because I'm a girl. That we have to go a step further and interrogate the intersection of poverty, racism, and gender inequities. Finally, I just want to encourage us to be bolder in challenging the power imbalances in the multilateral system. Much has been written over the past few weeks about how this moment is important for developing new models for multilateral cooperation. And for me, one starting point of that has to be the makeup of the OECD DAC. Because we have a situation whereby the leaders of the largest aid spending countries get together and they decide the rules about what does and what doesn't count as aid. And what that means is consequently that there are types of spending that are permissible within the rules that very few of us would really recognize as within our understanding of what that of aid. And NGOs have generally focused, in my experience, on challenging the rules rather than the system and the makeup of those organizations. And to be clear, the OECD DAC is, with the exception of Japan and Korea, it is a largely white, it's countries that are largely white, almost entirely Western, making up the rules. And I think that there is a real opportunity to strengthen the Global South kind of makeup, have countries from the Global South be part of the DAC, particularly countries from Africa, particularly countries from the Caribbean, because the countries that are on the other end of aid has to have a say in deciding what does and does not count.